very, very religious. Well, all churches are religious, but this one was extra religious.
Super
religious.
Religious XXL?
Yeah. It was the premium.
So, Chris describes wanting to be like a ballerina when he was only 6 years old, and because he grew up in the church.
Faith and Failures Podcast.
There is a person called Mr. Beast. Okay, so there's been a huge uproar about a guy on Mr. Beast that was like his sidekick. He was always there. He was always in the middle of everything, and he was more of he had jacked up trucks. You know, he was a guy. Okay, well now there's this huge controversy of now what is Mr. Beast going to do? If you ever watched any of Mr. Beast episodes, they were most of the time kid friendly. He would do philanthropy stuff. He would do, let's see, what's the most recent big thing that he would give away money, he'd give away houses. I saw one video where I think all of his friends had their hand on a house, and he said the last one to take their hand off gets the house. Like things like that. And people would give money to him, and he would just keep giving it out over and over again. Pretty cool stuff. Well, now there's this uproar of one of his co-hosts on there coming out as transgender. Okay, if you've been living under a rock, transgender is now the new thing. It's the new black. People are, and it seems to be not only, but 95%, even in the sports. There's no women transgender trying to go be in men's sports. It's always the men trying to be women, and it's just, I don't know. We're going to watch an interview that is going to talk about this topic, and I've mentioned this channel before. This is Whaddo, WHADDO, What Do You Meme? And he's actually a Christian, a YouTuber. So let's watch this video together, and he kind of talks about this topic. Whoops, sorry.
I thought it was a curse. I started taking HRT that I was like, this is not a curse. It's a blessing.
Chris Tyson is one of Mr. Beast's best friends and co-workers who recently set the internet on fire by coming out as non-binary. A lot of Chris's fans were upset because they felt like they were losing Chris, and others were primarily upset because Chris appeared to break up his family in order to pursue what he believed to be his true identity. But a few days ago, Chris had his first interview since the news broke, and I think that this was a really eye-opening interview, especially when it comes to the issue of identity. Let's get into it. So even though there was a lot of speculation as to what Chris was identifying with, early in the interview, Chris officially declared that he now identifies as a woman.
You've had a lot of people speculating on your gender.
Yes.
You know, just you growing out your hair.
Yeah.
Today you showed up fully presenting as a woman.
I did, because I am a woman.
Oh, shit.
She, her.
You've never said that before, right?
I've never said that publicly, no. But I've been fully confident in that decision for over a year now.
So over the last year, Chris became fully confident that he was indeed a woman. But where things started getting more interesting to me is when Chris started talking about what it was like growing up with gender dysphoria. Fear and rejection was a constant theme going all the way back to when Chris was only 6.
I was 6 years old. My sisters went to camp. My parents were in the living room. I told my parents that I was going to build a popsicle stick airplane in my room. And then I went to my sister's room and went in their closet and grabbed as much stuff as I can. And I locked my door and I turned on Arthur. And it was the episode where there was ballerinas and I just pretended to be a ballerina and danced around my room. And from that moment on, I was like, I don't know what this is, but I know I need to hide it, because I don't think the people, I don't remember exactly what made me hide it at such a young age, but I think it was just like, you know, growing up in that area, going to, you know, a very very, very religious. Well, all churches are religious, but this one was extra religious.
Super
religious.
Religious XXL?
Yeah. It was the premium.
So Chris describes wanting to be like a ballerina when he was only 6 years old, and because he grew up in the church, he knew that he wouldn't be accepted if he came out as a girl, so he hid his feelings from everyone else. But as Chris continued to talk about his internal perception of feeling like a woman, I thought it became much more clear to see just how hard that this was on Chris. The more that he talked, the more that you could see it on his face, just how incredibly hard this was for him to deal with.
For so long, every day, I would go to bed and I would have dreams, vivid dreams I was a woman, like my whole life. And I would wake up in the morning and it was just like getting ripped out of a reality that I didn't want to be taken out of.
So it was like the dream was the reality.
Yeah. There was times where I would just lay in bed all day and just sleep because it was more fun to do that or more enjoyable to me to do that, because the real world, I didn't feel connected to it. I've really never felt connected to my body.
All right, now this is important, and I think that it's a point that far too often goes overlooked in these sorts of conversations. As you just heard, it appears that Chris had a really hard time with dysphoria his entire life, which is a problem that might be easy for us to dismiss if we haven't experienced it, but a lot of times in these emotionally and politically charged conversations, it's easy for us to forget that these are real people going.
That's the catch right there. When you're listening and you're talking to stuff like this, you want to dismiss it. You want to be like, okay, this dude's got some mental illness. Fair point. But imagine, now think about this. Where would this guy be if he had somebody keeping him accountable, had somebody he can trust? And here's the thing. Look, we're not supposed to affirm sinful nature. Right? It's not supposed to be something we indulge in. But the church needs to be a place where sinners, like we all are, saved by grace, that they can feel like they can come to someone for help. Not for affirmation. That's a big difference. Not for affirmation, but for help. That something inside of them, a dysphoria, that it's a common term, gender dysphoria, they don't understand why they are this way. They don't know. But the reason he is where he is right now is because no one gave him, maybe they did, maybe he didn't take it because he didn't want to be embarrassed. And I can understand that. I'm a pastor of a church. I can't tell anybody what I'm dealing with. I mean, think about it. Pastors are supposed to be perfect, right? You're not supposed to have any hang-ups, mess-ups, or no sort of issues. We're supposed to be God's men and women who nothing touches us, when in reality, we're still flesh. We're flesh first. And so imagine if he had somebody that he could have went to, that he felt comfortable, that would not, like I said, Christians eat their own. We kill our own first. We kick them while they're down. And then we wonder why people don't come back to church. Because we're not being the church. We're being self-righteous morons that thinks that we have it all together because maybe we're not dealing with something right now. But I guarantee you, at some point in your life, God will send out a huge meal of humility, and you will need somebody to turn to. You will need somebody to lean on. And who are you going to have to do that if you've kicked and ate everybody around you? You'll be by yourself.
Going through real issues that seem incredibly confusing and difficult to navigate. But although I can sympathize with where Chris is coming from, we've reached points in the conversation where Chris and I would probably strongly disagree. For example, take a listen.
Like you were talking about, 6, 7, 8 months ago, my hair started growing out, all those kind of things. I wasn't quite sure exactly who I was yet, but I knew I was not cisgender. So I needed...
Okay, it's just gender. Stop. The cis thing gets on my nerves. It's just gender. Anyways.
The freedom to be able to express myself and be able to figure out who I was. And so for a while, I was trying gender fluid. I was like, what is making me feel like I'm bi-gender? What is tying me to this, masculinity? And really it was after a lot of talking with a therapist and a lot of like self reflection, I realized it was really just the societal pressure of, you're Chris from Mr. Beast. You're the guy that starts the...
Because now how he is not society pressure at all, huh?
Fires. You're the guy that builds the stuff, And like my whole life I've enjoyed doing those things, but I've never really felt like the guy. Yeah. I came out to myself with my therapist. And it took like 3 therapy sessions where I was like, I've known this for a long time. I'm pretty sure. And then I was, I know and then I was like, I am a woman. And it was hard for me to say.
I understand, but no, you're not. You just have makeup on, even if you cut yourself up. Now, I'm not saying this to be rude. I'm not saying this to be mean or hateful, but 8 weeks into my wife's pregnancy, we took a blood test and they could tell us what the gender was before we ever saw it on a sonogram. The very definition of what our genders are is in our blood. You don't get to decide that. I'm sorry. You can't just make it up because you feel a certain way.
That because I was so scared of saying I am a woman and then instantly hearing, no, you're not. Because in my head,
'Cause you're not.
I fought with that every day.
Now, what's interesting about everything that was just said there is that it's only recently that we as a culture started looking inside to find out who we truly are. In the past, if you asked people who they were at core, they would appeal to who they were in their family by referencing their family name or by appealing to what they did for work as a contribution to their group or tribe. But what's interesting is that the way that they knew that they were living out their true identity was by suppressing their internal intuitions or feelings or desires for the sake of their family and or their job. But today is almost the exact opposite. For example, as Chris goes on, we see him and Anthony in agreement that our internal perception of ourselves should be elevated over our group and our occupation rather than identifying with our group or our occupation.
People making YouTube videos saying that your decision to be yourself and to openly be yourself is destroying Mr. Beast and it's gonna mess up the business, and you should have thought about that.
I should have thought about that. That's all.
How dare you ruin the business by being your true self?
How dare you exist?
Now, if you listen closely, underneath their words was the assumption that our true self is tied to our sexual identity. Tying our sexual expression with our core identity is a recent shift in culture that isn't like any time before. In fact, this assumption has been so dominant in our culture today that no one even stops to question if it's even true, because it's just an unspoken assumption that everyone's expected to know and accept. But even though today we believe that we're discovering our truest selves by looking to our sexual expression, in reality, it seems to me that we're only finding out who society says that we are, rather than finding out who we truly are. Tim Keller illustrated this point in one of his books this way. Imagine an Anglo-Saxon warrior in Britain AD 800. He looks into his heart and he sees two strong inner impulses and feelings. One is aggression. When people show him any disrespect, his natural response is to respond violently, either to harm or to kill. He enjoys battle. Now, living in a shame and honor culture with a warrior ethic, he will identify with that feeling. He will feel no shame or regret over it. He will say, "That's me. That's who I am. I will express that." But let's say that the other impulse he sees in his heart is same-sex attraction. He wishes that were not there. He would look at that feeling and say, "That's not me. I will control and suppress that." Now come forward to today. Imagine a young man walking around Manhattan. He has the same two impulses, both equally strong. What will he say to himself? He will look at the aggression and say, "This is not who I am," and will go to therapy or some anger management programs. He will look at his sexual desire, however, and conclude, "This is who I am. That's me." So in this particular example, why does the person think that his sexual desires is who he is, and the Anglo-Saxon thinks of himself as hostile to that identity? The reason why is because society is the one that informed them of their identity, and the same goes for us today. Although we like to think that we're the ones who decide who we really are, in reality, it's our culture that tells us who we really are, rather than discovering it for ourselves. We unconsciously adopt our identity from our society and mistakenly believe that we're the ones making the discovery. So when Chris says he found who he truly was by looking to his sexual identity, like all of us today, he could be mistaken. But something else that easily gets overlooked in our culture today can be seen in what they say next.
And the thing that was really keeping me for so long away from like who I truly am is how people would react. I was so scared of, like, I'm from a small town in a conservative area. So when I was younger, I was like, this little bubble is my entire world. How will they react? Then I got a little older. I was like, maybe one day, and then I got famous and my bubble went from this small little town to hundreds of millions of people.
So Chris talks about being part of a group that was religious and conservative and his fears of how they would react. And despite his fears, he decided to just be himself and not care what anyone else thought. But even though we like to say, I'll be true to myself no matter what anyone else thinks, and feel proud for being our true selves in the face of rejection, there's still a reason why we post these stories on our social media pages for everyone else to see. The reason why is because we all need to get acceptance from outside of ourselves, even while we're telling the world how much we don't care about what anyone else thinks. What's hidden in these stories about us being our true selves in the face of rejection from a particular group is that they're often really a cry for acceptance from a different group that we want to be part of. We hope that they'll validate us for bravely proclaiming who we are in the face of adversity, since that's something that's seen as heroic in today's culture. But essentially what we're doing when we complain about being rejected by one group is secretly hoping to gain acceptance from a different group. And this leads to the real issue in all of this. Like Chris, it isn't enough for us to just want to be our honest and our true selves. What we really want, even more than that, is to be accepted for being our honest and our true selves. We all want to be valued by those that we find valuable. We all want to be adored by those that we adore. And we also want to be accepted by those that we accept. It's simply not possible to only seek our own validation in life and remain mentally healthy. We all need someone or some group outside of ourselves to tell us that we're valuable so that way we can believe it. But what if the one that affirms and accepts us is the God of the universe? Now, for those of you that aren't Christian, I understand. I know this sounds weird, but as a Christian now, it makes complete sense to me. The gospel in a nutshell is that none of us are perfect and all of us have done things that are wrong. But in order to live in the presence of a perfect God, we too must be perfect. This is why the God of the universe put on human flesh, came into our world, lived the life that we should have lived, and died the death that we should have died. And he then offers that life to us in our place, so that way when we stand before God on Judgment Day, our salvation is judged based off of the life that he lived rather than the life that we lived. He offers that to us as a free and undeserved gift. All we have to do is accept it.
Woo! That's right. All we got to do is accept it. Now, that is the message that should be from the Christians, especially people who are confused and caught up in lifestyles like the interview we just watched. Somebody goes through a drastic transformation. I don't know if he's doing the whole surgery thing or not, but it will never be what they're wanting it to be. They're chasing after a false sense of something, that they are looking to something on a hill and they're seeing it, they're trying to obtain it, but it's never obtainable. And that's the danger of pursuing sinful nature, is that you always are chasing after something that you can't actually obtain. And then it's like Cool Whip. When you finally get it, it seems like a lot is there. It seems like it's good, it's sweet, but there's no substance to it. There's no actual, it doesn't bear true weight, and it's never what you think it is. The only time that when you chase after something like this and you get it and it satisfies and it truly fills you down to the core, down to your soul, is in Jesus. That's the only time when you give yourself over to God that you are truly, the things that we chase after through our sinful nature and our stupidity, trying to obtain something, the only time we really are satisfied and we find true joy and not just happiness. Happiness is found in things, even in people, but true joy is only found in God.